Okay, welcome everybody. It's Friday, September 20th. My name is Amid Amidi. I'm the publisher of Cartoon Brew, and I am based in Los Angeles, and I am joined by, introduce yourself.
It's so funny. I never know. Hi, I'm Cole Delaney, and I'm in Dublin, in Ireland. Yes, my name is not introduced myself yet. Never know what to do.
Did I
I mean, we've
already
got a
did I
lot going
already
on this
mess
week.
up? Like we're like two
No,
minutes
no,
in,
no, no,
and I've
no.
already made a faux pas.
Well, it's funny, and maybe I shouldn't reveal this, but it's like I'm always laughing when we go live because the last sentence I hear every time before we go live is, "How do I go live?" Every single time. But anyways, enough of behind the scenes. We're here for a serious chat.
I'm still learning how
Yeah,
all of this works. But hi, Pablo Peruzzi. We've got a hello there, so welcome.
Hi, Pablo. Welcome.
Yeah, we're gonna jump this week right into the big story. It's the thumbnail of the image. Sorry, it's the YouTube thumbnail that we're using, and what is that? The story is it is not Norm of the North, though. Um, it is this one.
No.
It is this one. That's a we're gonna talk a little bit about Lionsgate and AI coming up as well. So because that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge story, and I see I have the wrong. There we go.
There we
So we
go.
don't have a guest this week. We thought we were gonna have a guest, but we're probably gonna have one. Well, next week I'll be in Ottawa, so we're gonna have a bit of a delay for the next
Mhm.
episode. Anyway, on to this story. Yesterday, big news that Jennifer Lee, the chief creative officer of Walt Disney Animation Studios, is stepping down, and Jared Bush is coming on board. Cole, did you? I don't know if you've had a chance to go through the story yet, but do you want to take us through the story a little bit? I'll just bring it up right here, and we
Pretty
can
big news.
talk a little bit about it. She had been there since 2018 when she took
Yeah.
over for John Lasseter. And
Mm.
she's a screenwriter, and she
Yeah.
had worked on, I want to say she was involved in, should have looked this up, but somebody can tell us if we're wrong. She might have been involved in Wreck-It Ralph initially, but she kind of broke out with Frozen, and she wrote
Yeah.
that film, and she co-directed that, and that was been one of Disney's big franchises, and that apparently was enough to get her into that position of chief creative officer when they were looking for somebody after
Mm.
Lazar left.
Mm.
But Cole, just take us through the story a little bit about who's taking over right now.
Yeah, she was involved with Wreck-It Ralph. She was one of the writers on it, as far as I remember. With Phil Johnson, I think asked her to come in with him. So it's been taken over by Jared Bush, who is also another prolific director. Most recently, would have gone through Encanto, which again was, I think, probably Disney's biggest success in recent years. Most people, I don't think, are aware, which is bizarre, about the most recent Disney films. A lot of people didn't really watch Wish, and loads of people don't even know about Strange World. Like, they are the last two feature like Disney films that were released,
Do you think
and
that has
this is
anything to
all
do
under.
with Jennifer Lee leaving?
Well, I don't know. I don't
People
know,
not
Mito.
knowing
I'm
your
not there.
films exist is not a good thing. So
It's not a good thing at all,
yeah.
um, which is strange as well. A strange world, um, but especially because Wish was Disney's 100th year anniversary, right? And this is a studio built on animation, so it was a big tentpole film that just kind of didn't hold up any kind of tent, really and truly. So, what's happening here is, as you said, a tumultuous 6 year run as Walt Disney's animation studio chief creative officer. She's going to step down. Now, this had been hinted at in the past before, hadn't it? I mean, there was something. Um, um, I think you had said they were talking about it before at the start of the year. You pressed Disney for a comment on it, didn't you?
Yeah, there were no hints, that the public hints,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
it's been commonly known throughout the industry.
Mm,
People have been saying since the spring that
yeah.
she's out, right? That she already
Mm,
had an
mm,
exit deal in place. I think the first time I kind of sensed that that she was on her way out
mm.
was actually this announcement here. It was last November. I want to say
Yeah.
this was before um, Wish came out.
Mm,
Probably was before Wish came out. But the testing was done for Wish, and at this point, they already knew the film was not going to be, a success. I suspect that this has been that her departure had been in the works for a long time.
mm,
Something was really off about this. That Iger was, saying, "Oh, we're doing two more, Frozen films." It kind of seemed to me that they were looking for a way to kind of drive,
guide
give
her
her,
out.
guide her into
Yeah.
back into filmmaking. I mean, obviously with her, involvement, but they were like, Disney cannot fire their first chief creative female chief creative
Mm.
officer who's a woman, right?
Yeah.
So they needed to find an exit strategy for her, and I think, giving her more Frozen films that gives her the opportunity to then say, elegantly, I can't handle this, this workload. I want to focus on filmmaking, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so there was some suspicion when this happened, and also,
Yeah.
you can't have Strange World and um, Wish back to back. You can't just
Yeah.
have two films like that completely bombed. Strange World was the biggest money loser in Hollywood in 2022, and Wish lost. Again, numbers are hard to come by, but we do know it's been said that it lost over $100 million.
Wow.
But more than that, the enthusiasm. I mean, those numbers don't really
Mm.
mean anything to Disney ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
right? Right? They don't make their money from films.
Yeah.
We've discussed that before, you know, in the past. So it's not that the money's a big thing, but they're losing kind of their cultural cachet with
Mm.
this string of films. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into why people are going to see these films, because
Mm.
you could come up with a million different reasons for why people aren't seeing
Mm-hmm.
these films. But it is very clear that she was out of her league. She was not from the world of animation.
Mm-hmm.
Putting a screenwriter in there who has
Mm.
zero animation production experience outside of she was involved as a director in Frozen, but she wasn't doing the animation directing, right? She was there
Mm-hmm.
more for story and I'm sure being involved in editing. I'm sure being involved on that side of it, but she has zero
Mm.
animation experience. I mean, that's not necessarily the best person to put in there to run an animation studio creatively,
Mm.
right? So those reasons are obvious, but why the films that do well, that's for another discussion.
That's for
But
another discussion. Yeah,
but
I
yeah,
just have
so
two comments here popped in before I ask about then Jared Bush, right? Hello from who's that? Is it Ole? Ollie? Can't really see it from here. Hello. And also Bob Iger needs to step down as Disney CEO and let another younger, more competent one take over. Well, as we saw last week, the one he had appointed, he made belittled the whole time anyway. So I'm not sure
we
that's
didn't
going
we
to
didn't
happen.
talk about that last week, but that's that big
Oh,
New
did we
York.
not?
No, we wanted to, but we never got around to it. That's that big New
Oh,
York
the
Times
Bobs and the
piece.
Bobs.
Yeah, that's the big New York Times
Yes.
piece that we do need to talk about at some point, about what happened
Well,
at Disney during the
yeah.
Bob Chapek tenure.
Well,
Could you
let's bring it
boost
up
up your
now.
volume, please? Okay.
Yeah.
How do we
I
do
could
that?
talk louder. How about, how about that? That's all you and me.
how,
There's an
how do
output
we do
volume
that?
slider. But I will say, you know, Jared Bush then taking over, right, as the next person to kind of step in. And Jared obviously has a string of very successful films under his belt as well, like with Encanto, things like Zootopia's in there as well, Moana as a screenwriter. Um, like these are all hard hitters of a more recent Disney oeuvre, especially Encanto. Like that was huge. That was really really big. That struck a cultural nerve. But my question then to you, Amid, is why do you think they asked him to step up as the chief creative officer?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny. He's had his hands in pretty much every non-Frozen hit in the last decade at the studio. He has been
Yeah.
very involved.
Mm.
There's two things. First of all, Disney likes to promote from within. Disney Animation.
Hmm.
Some studios bring from the outside. When they need a new person. Disney
Yeah.
likes to promote from within. That's just the culture of the studio. Pixar's been that
Mm.
way as well. So they rise up the ranks. So they need to find somebody inside the studio. Here's the problem: they had no directors there that had really kind of leadership qualities or
Mm.
capabilities
Mm.
outside of Jared Bush. And I think Byron Howard certainly is a great director, but
Yeah.
it's not a job that he wants, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are certain people who want, they want to. Here's the thing: you need to have a certain set of skills, And second, you need to actually want to do that job, right? Because when you become chief creative officer, it's not as creative as being a director,
Ironically.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Today, they just announced that Byron Howard is coming back as a co-director on Zootopia 2. Initially,
Mm,
Jared Bush was the solo director, which was also a very rare case of a Disney film having a
very rare.
solo director. But now that he just took over this role, and I'm sure this has been in the works for a while again, but they announced
Yeah.
officially that Byron Howard is actually coming back to on Zootopia 2 as well, and he was involved in the
Mm.
first film. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
and does that yeah.
I was just
Sorry,
gonna
go on.
say I think Bush is kind of the logical choice simply because they did not have a lot of people
Mm,
there, and a lot of this, again, how much was this Jennifer Lee's, doing, and how much wasn't, I don't know, but
mm,
really part
mm.
of her job is to develop talent, right? And
Yes,
to
yeah.
promote leaders. And she was bringing in people like the Raya, the director of the Raya film, some live action, screenwriter.
Hmm.
It was a focus on writing rather than
Mm,
she wasn't promoting talent that needed to be promoted into the director's chair from inside.
mm.
She was kind of bringing in random people that was gonna, this is what they do in animation studios a lot. Is they're like, we need a fresh voice. Well, that fresh
Yeah.
voice is never a visual fresh voice. It's always like some
No.
screenwriter who has no idea what they're doing and why they're involved. And the films were just like Raya was incredibly formulaic. It's just it felt
Mm,
like they were just it felt like they were going through the paces on Raya and Strange World. Like they're just hitting. They have to hit certain story beats, but they're not doing anything that takes advantage of animation as an art form. What Disney had done with its visual storytelling.
yeah.
Those early films. That we still look at. They
Mm,
totally forgot about visual storytelling.
yeah, that's true. And then you had something like Encanto, which was very true to its flair, which was it's a theatrical piece. It's an animated theater piece. Like it's an animated Broadway show, quite literally. It all takes place in one house, and they use the strengths of like previous writers, and obviously Jared and Byron were involved with that, but also Lin Manuel Miranda. So they had like the right mix of people in that. Whereas when I look at the other films, you're totally right. It does seem to be just kind of let's try this thing here, that thing there, and it's not really landing with the audiences, anyways. Certainly not with me. And that's a really interesting way to think about it, like developing talent, because you don't really you look at the early days of Pixar and all those guys, but I think they said very quickly they needed an outside voice, and they brought Brad Bird in with The Incredibles, but he had an established background in animation already and a very strong voice in that field. Um, so yeah, interesting.
Uh, you know, at a certain level, people are like,
Mm,
how's Jared Bush going to change, to Disney? And at a certain level, like audiences don't even notice when these kind of changes happen behind the scenes, right? I mean, this
yeah.
is supposed to be a smooth process. They're putting out a
Mm,
consistent product, and they want people to not know that this stuff is happening. That's not, there's supposed to be a consistency between leaders. So
mm,
I don't know what kind of changes we'll see, but I can tell you there was certainly a change between Lasseter and Jennifer Lee. The studio
big
certainly
time.
became
Yeah.
more focused on stories that were related to generational trauma. It
Mm,
became more focused on stories that were, had, uh, you know, culturally different
hmm.
types of people in it. Certainly like in
Yeah.
Kanto or Raya. They tried to
Mm.
squeeze in some, LGBT stuff. I don't think they were ever to figure out how to do that, right?
Yeah,
But
they didn't
but
quite land
certainly
that. Yeah.
there was a change. I mean, you can see that she was doing some things differently, but
Hmm.
in terms of the characters that the studio was making, the
Mm.
characters suffered. Certainly, there were the characters in the films that were made under the Lasseter era were far more uh, generically entertaining characters, right? They were
Yeah.
kind of the type of, they hit the right story beats and had the personalities that you expect from those films, and that's why he was so successful. I mean, he took over
Hmm.
at a time in, I want to say 2006, 2007, when Disney was really struggling, right? They were not,
Really struggling.
they had
Yeah.
not, and so he really, like, you can see that Lasseter
Hmm.
influence on how he changed the studio. And I think, Lee wasn't there long enough for you to really see what she was doing, or maybe we did see what she was capable of, and that's why they decided, this is not a good direction for the studio.
Mm.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Certainly, Jared Bush, he's been the most successful uh, person there in the last decade in
Yeah.
terms of having his name attached to all the right projects, even like Moana as a writer. And he's actually
Yeah.
working on the what's he doing right now? He's a writer and EP on the second one as well. So
Mm.
he's
And I will say, look, I had the pleasure of talking to Jared and Byron for the Encanto release, and out, I found him to be a very authentic person in terms of what his stories he's trying to tell, right? In terms of like he really has something to say here and trying to push through this stuff. Now, will that make someone be a good chief creative officer? I don't know. But I know that if someone has something to say, that's a very important thing to do. You know what I mean? And like you said, he's been attached to all the right things, and he's seen people that I've met and talk about him. He seems like a very lovely guy. So really do wish him all the best in this, as if my opinion matters to the success of the Disney animated films. But I'd be really curious to see, because again, there's going to be a bit of time before we see what this influence comes to be, right? Because all the things that are slated and are active at the moment, they'll still have some elements of the past, but we'll see. And it's all sequels slated going forward, isn't it? Everything is like Moana 2, Zootopia 2, Frozen 3. So it feels a
Frozen
bit like a
4.
transitionary. Frozen
Yeah,
4.
yeah, they've got, no, they do have original stuff in development right now,
Oh, do they? Okay.
but they haven't
That's good.
announced everything that they've announced. As far as I know,
Yeah.
is sequels at this point. Yeah, it's just
Okay.
not a,
Yeah.
it's a very kind of transitionary period for the studio,
Transitionary thing. Yeah.
and it's not, what they're doing is maintaining. They're kind of in maintenance mode, but
Mm,
they've really got nothing that I mean, of course, Frozen is going to be a big hit, right? I mean,
of
it's
course.
not
Yeah.
like that film's gonna, no, they know what they're doing, that people want
Yeah.
more Frozen, and I guess they're delivering it. But if you're an animation fan, if you're somebody who
Yeah.
goes to these films to see something fresh and exciting, and if you're looking for the next Spider Verse, or you're looking for the next Wild Robot, which
Mm,
I don't know if we'd spoken about. I saw that
we did.
film. I saw it last weekend, so yeah, it was after the last live stream.
Oh,
Boy,
you watched it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw it, and talk about a great film. If you're looking for anything like that, yeah, you're
No.
probably not going to find it from Disney, because they've got a very, they've got Moana 2 coming up, and they've got stories that people want to see, but they're not really doing anything new at this moment, or they
Oh
haven't
my gosh.
announced anything new.
Mm.
Yeah, Wild Robot.
Well,
That's I said it online too, but that's not just best animated feature of the year. That's best picture quality. It's an incredible film
wow.
as an
Yeah.
animated
I
film,
mean,
and
oh my gosh.
we have another robot film opening this week, Transformers One, which I have not seen, but there's it's all robots, right? And I've got like zero interest in robots, but Wild Robot and Iron Giant, like, these are amazing robot films. I mean, they're
Yeah. You
just,
mean Transformers? Or oh no, sorry, Iron
no,
Giant. Sorry,
Iron
you haven't
Giant.
seen
Yeah,
Transformers.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
haven't seen
Yeah.
Transformers, but I'm saying, as
Yeah.
someone who has no interest in robots, some of the best animated films of the last 20 years have been, robots in them. So I don't know.
Yeah. As much as you're not interested in robots, I'm sorry to say, they're interested in you, and they're not going to let you go. They're not going to let you go. Big news, yeah. In terms of again that Bob Iger comment, I'd be curious to see who's kind of helming this. But again, look, a change was needed, and you can see by the slate of what has been put out in recent times. Without Encanto there, you'd nearly say Raya, Strange World, Wish were all on that downward slope. Encanto kind of peaked it back up, and then you've got the next three: 2024, 25, 27. I know there's some stuff supposed to be in between, but they're all sequels. So it is like let's just weather the storm while we figure this stuff out, basically.
Yeah, where's the list of Disney films? Here we go.
There you
Okay,
go.
so I mean, we can see what she did. Moana was
we,
not her.
we can see what she did.
Well, no, no. I mean, let's take a look, a little quick
Literally.
survey at what she
Yeah.
did. Moana, she was not running the studio at the time. Ralph Breaks the
Mm.
Internet, she was running the studio at the time, but that film was, she came in she came in 2018, so she wouldn't
Yeah.
have been
So that,
that you can't really credit that to her. I think
no,
the first film you
no.
could credit to her was Frozen 2, which was a huge hit.
But she was one of the directors in that, wasn't she?
Exactly, yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
but also she was running the studio at the time, so she gets we'll
Mm.
give her credit for that. Then she did
Yeah.
Raya and the Last Dragon, Oscar nominated film. Also, I believe EP'd by Jared Bush, so he was involved in
Okay.
that one as well.
Hmm.
Encanto, Oscar winner. Both films were
Oscar
nominated for
winner.
Oscars
Yeah.
in the same year, right? And then you had, but if you remember too, Encanto, it took a while for it to kind of register in the cultural consciousness, right? It wasn't a
I
big
did it
hit.
because once we don't talk about Bruno kind of hit the waves, that really took it
Yeah, but
off.
that didn't hit the waves till December, right? It was one of those things that was at the
Mm.
film when it came out, it wasn't as big of a hit, and then that song took off in
Yeah.
December of 2021, and then it kind of
Mm-hmm.
became a phenomenon after that, right? Like I remember that January through March, that Oscar season, it was quite, there was a lot of people talking about it. I believe it was a hit online, so it had a limited run. Again, she was there at a weird time too. It was COVID.
Yeah.
A lot of these films weren't
Mm.
getting the full theatrical releases that they deserved. They were getting kind of truncated releases.
Mm.
Then you had Strange World and Wish. So those two films, which I'm
Yeah.
sure these films were in development too, while Lasseter was there. Maybe not Wish, but I would assume
Well,
Strange World would have been like
what's crazy to me
started.
is like Raya is 2021. Obviously, it was in development before, but I remember talking to Don and Carlos and Qui about it, and they kind of came on the project late and totally changed everything. Right? It was a very different project.
Right. You're
And then
right.
Strange World, if you look, is directed by Don and Qui, and that's a year later released.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the turnaround times in these is very. I don't know how the development time on these. I don't know the directorial time, but I feel like neither of those films were really given the time they needed to kind of really figure it out.
Well, I think you just hit on something interesting there, right? Because you don't
Mm.
usually have a main director who has two films in 1 year in animation, right?
Yeah,
Or in a year and a
it
half, in an
never.
18
Yeah,
month
it never
period.
happened.
That doesn't happen. So clearly there was stuff going on, but you also look at the the other director on there was Carlos Lopez Estrada, who's a screenwriter,
Mm.
right? That's why you have those other co-directors who are the
Yeah.
people who are involved in production and understand how animation production works. I don't think
Hmm.
Carlos Lopez Estrada is really in the day to day of production because he doesn't know the day to day of production at Disney, right?
Mm.
So he has the
Yeah.
title of director, but really the co-directors are the people doing the heavy lifting there. And Paul Briggs was one of the original directors of the first
Hmm.
Raya. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just
And
it's just
Carlos, I know he did a lot of live action music videos before, and this film
mhm.
famously doesn't have music in it. It's not a theater. It's not a musical
Yeah, great
movie.
choice for that. And then
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Strange World, you have Don Hall directing it, and then you have
Hmm.
Key Nguyen, who
Yeah.
is again another screenwriter,
Qui Gwen.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
he
mean, I
he
mean,
screenwrote Raya. Like he was one of the screenwriters on Raya.
and he wrote Strange
You know.
World. So
Mm.
if you
Hmm.
if you I don't know. I don't know who's I don't know the who's who, like who is doing what on these films,
Yeah.
but it's weird that you have a solo director on Strange World and you have a
Mm,
co-director who is not really involved in animation production. This is
mm,
and then you have Wish, which is done by two people who are very involved in animation
mm.
production. You have Chris Buck, who's a legend at
Yeah.
Disney, and
Yeah.
directed the first Frozen with Jennifer Lee, and has been at the studio for decades. I don't know if he's been consistently at the studio for decades, but he's certainly been involved with Disney since the '80s. And
Yeah.
then you have Fawn Vera Sunthorn, who is a well established story artist and knows the Disney
Hmm.
process inside and out. So you had the right team there, but I don't think it was a directing problem there. I think it was they had a lot of different directions that they would. I don't think they were ever able to settle on a clear vision for that film,
Yeah.
and
And
so
then you see who wrote the screenplay right beside it there.
yeah, yeah.
And so maybe you are touching on something, you know?
Yeah. Anyway, it's going to be interesting to see what happens at Disney over the next few years. Disney's one of those studios that you just don't count out.
Mm,
They've created so many cultural touchstones, and they're one film away from creating another cultural touchstone. And they already
yeah.
have multiple ones that are like Frozen and Zootopia 2 and Frozen 3. I mean they already have films that people want to see, and
Yeah.
we'll just see what happens over the next few years.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's
Let's
let's.
hit with some positive news for the industry. Uh,
Hey,
Lionsgate
speaking.
signs deal. Yeah,
Well,
sorry,
before
go on.
we, before we talk about this, positive news is negotiations are started up again this week for the Animation Guild. Round two of negotiations between the AMPTP and the Animation
Wow.
Guild. So, nothing, no news
Click
out of that.
click your sound effects there, Amit.
Yeah,
That's let's have a round of applause for that. Um,
that wasn't the right sound effect. Um,
that's also not the right sound
not
effect.
the right sound. What do I do?
Cheer, clapping, clapping. Are they not
Anyway,
labeled? Are they not labeled?
they are labeled, but I'm not sure which
Yeah.
one's going to give us the right mood enhancer that we
Is there
need.
one that says cheers and celebration or clapping? There you go.
Okay, negotiations are
There you
back.
go. Yeah. Hooray.
uh,
Um,
it's
so
actually
yeah.
quite scary. I'm on Twitter. There's a lot of younger artists who are in their 20s who
Mm,
are talking about having to leave LA because they can't find work.
mm,
LA is super expensive to live in if you don't have work. It's like it's not a
yeah.
livable city if you don't have work. And there's artists who are talking about having to leave LA. It's a very tough time in the industry if you are
Yeah.
in your mid to late 20s because you would have started in the industry right around 2017, 18, 19, right? And that was a boom
Mm,
period for animation. And then you also had the boom period immediately when COVID started. And then ever
yeah.
since then, it's just been since 2022, 23, it's been complete silence. They've basically stopped making content. This is not true,
Mm,
obviously. I mean, they're still making content, but I'm talking about the scale. It's slowed down, and work is very slim right now,
mm,
and it's sad to see so many of these younger artists in their 20s who have not experienced a downturn like this. I talk to people who have been in this industry for 20, 30 years, and they say that they haven't seen a downturn this bad in their career. So if you're a younger person
wow.
who's just starting out, you certainly haven't seen a downturn like this. And it's not like they're paying you tons of money that you can have savings and you can ride out
Mm,
a couple years. If you are kind of been around for 20, 30 years, there's a chance that you have a little bit of a nest egg, and you can, get through 12 months, 18 months of not a lot of work. But if you're
Mm.
younger, it's really tough out there, and so you feel really bad for a lot of these younger artists who are struggling, and that leads us into this because the future
Future
is
looks great.
looking, yeah, the future looks
Yeah.
really kind of like unsteady right now, because on top of the fact that streaming kind of collapsed, and
Yeah.
production has slimmed down, as we move into this next phase of animation production, we have to deal with this new thing called AI.
Mm.
And this story that came out this week is not necessarily related to animation. It's related to a Hollywood studio. But here's a Hollywood
Mm.
studio that Lionsgate, which they have 20,000 titles in their library, film and TV, John Wick and The Hunger Games and Twilight and all of that. And they're saying we're going to feed all of that into a machine, and we're going to create our own custom AI model
Mm.
of that generates cinematic video, and that's going to be used for pre-production processes and post-production processes. Pre-production meaning storyboarding.
Yeah.
They're going to basically eliminate storyboard, or they're not going to, but they want to eliminate storyboard artists for live action production.
Mm.
And on the back end, the vice chairman of Lionsgate said, we do a lot of action movies, so we blow a lot of things up, and this is one of the things Runway does. They want to
Mm.
use AI to replace visual effects. Now, you work in the film and you work in the live action film industry. You don't necessarily
Hmm.
do visual effects, but you do kind of on screen graphics. And
Well, I've done
how do you
visual
feel about it?
effects. Yeah.
Yeah, you have done visual
Well,
effects.
look,
Okay.
I'm like, yeah, I've done post on some things before, and I don't like it. It's already a pretty dog eat dog world. It's just the timelines are unrealistic, and the money is very bad. You know what I mean? And there's no protection. Whereas the thing is, in pre-production or during production, you can always say, "I don't know how to solve this now. I'll push it down the pipeline to post-production." But those visual effects artists, they have to solve the problem. They have to solve it. Otherwise, the film isn't going to be, it's just not going to look good. So they have to do it. So they're under an incredible amount of stress to make the film finally be what the director envisioned when nobody else could get it there before, right? And to do that under like low time constraints, um, underpaid, it's just not a good mix. Like my heart goes out to visual effects artists; they always do. I tried it, I can't do it. And in terms of pre-production, I'm lucky that where I am positioned, I do get to see the storyboards that come through in for live action. And let me tell you, they're nowhere near as beautiful or as complicated as animation storyboards. Animation storyboards have to have everything on the page to get it, whereas live action storyboards, they're just a framing tool. That's generally what they are, to say this is the shot we're thinking of, this is the kind of thing. It's usually all in the director's head. Now that will change based on virtual production, because virtual production needs to know what's coming down the pipeline for it to be fully finished. So they have to, so they can map everything on the backgrounds of those kind of volumes that they have. And so everything needs to be already planned. So I know a lot of studios that will run virtual production, they recommend the animation pipeline as to how to approach that. Get it all on paper first, so that by the time you're shooting, there's no more decisions being made as to let's move it here, let's move it there, because it all needs to be tightly controlled. But I can see how a studio like this would want in live action to use AI to basically generate a shot list for them. That's basically what it's going to be doing, a visual shot list, right? Because storyboarding really is about the emotion, and it's about figuring out interesting and new angles. Whereas in live action, a lot of directors, while they may storyboard, they're really storyboarding what type of shots they want, and then they have the freedom on the day to kind of move around. Um, so it's generating a shot list. But as we know, with something like this, it's not a good thing, because you're only going to end up with regurgitated movies, and everything's going to feel the same, right? If everyone's using that same tool, there's no realm of creativity when it comes to this. It might be a great reference tool to say, type in and pull up whatever movie I like, and it gives you all those frames without you having to go look for it. But generating storyboard frames from a catalog, you're making a ceiling, and creativity is not going to go above that ceiling if you're totally reliant on a tool like that. And if that's all you're eating, then what you're outputting is going to be bad as well.
But what happens?
That's my
Do you think
spiel.
it's logical though the director could use it as a starting point, and that they could save, according to this guy, millions and millions of dollars?
I don't think you're going to save million. Maybe I think the millions. You're not going to save that in not definitely not a live action. You're not going to save that in pre-production by getting a live action doesn't use as much storyboarding as animation does. It just doesn't do it. It just isn't that way. They're a loose tool. They're not referred to as a biblical Bible. And I think I think maybe the focus on visual effects is where they're gonna save the most money. You know.
I wonder if it's going to be used mostly as an in-house tool, though. Like you're trying to sell something
Mm.
to executives, right? A director's trying to sell a project, and they're like, they create a little 5 minute, film through
Like an
AI,
animatic or something.
right? Kind
Yeah.
of not even. I mean, this is generating cinematic video. It's and
Well.
it's generating original cinematic video based off of the model of inputting thousands and thousands of hours of television content and live action
Hmm.
content. And then, you know, you know, executives are famous for not being able to, understand anything unless it's like right in front of them, right? So they
That's
don't,
true. Yeah.
you can't just go there and pitch something, but you show them something that looks kind of finished. It's not the film, but it's some kind of demo, right? And
Mm.
and a director is able to show that, and they're going, okay, you get a green light for that, and then they go off to do their own thing. Could the tool not be used for that? I mean, I assume this is when they say we're using it for internal purposes. This is
Mm.
how it might be used, because it's certainly not going to be able to use to generate visual effects that are, I think, controllable, granular enough
Yeah.
to be able to be implemented into the final film. Not at this stage, right?
Yeah.
But
That's an
certainly,
insane suggestion. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. From them, like that sounds crazy.
Well, I think they're trying to
Um.
raise their stock price too, right? This is, every company that's they're a public company. Every company that
Yeah.
said like we're doing AI, right? They just get a bump in
Mhm.
their price. So this is a way to kind of for investors to go, hey, we're looking towards the future. This is what we can do, right? And people get excited about that, even if it's not actually going to happen. It's going to help their
Mm.
stock price go up a little bit. I mean, that's what I assume is kind of
Yeah.
the cynical way of looking at this announcement. But I just found it interesting that they're no longer hiding the fact that we want AI to replace human workers, right? Like this
Yeah.
has kind of been
Yeah.
the ongoing kind of storyline, but no film studio exec at this level has just come out and said it. Like, hey,
Mm.
we want to replace workers, and he doesn't say we're going to replace workers, but the subtext is very clear, right? We're going to save
Yeah.
millions and millions of dollars. How are you going to do that? You do that by using the model
Yeah.
to
Chop out people. Yeah.
yeah.
That's
um
crazy. It is. Sorry, before you go on, this runway company, right? Uh, I noticed in the article you talk about how. I just want to read his statement, right? I just want to read the statement. Okay, he said that the company is committed to giving artists, that's we know they're not, creators and studios. That seems to be the more honest thing there. the best and most powerful tools to augment their workflows and enable new ways of bringing their stories to life. The history of art is the history of technology. Okay, fair enough. And these new models are part of our continuous efforts to build transformative mediums for artistic and creative expression. The best stories are yet to be told. Now, look, I understand that there's no such thing as new. Everything is a remix of the old, right? But when it comes to AI, it literally is just a replication device. That's all it's really doing. It's total replication rather than exploration, if that makes sense. And that's really where creativity crosses the line, because you can start from replication, but you start to explore it more and more and more. Whereas these AI tools that I've seen, they're incredible at replicating, but they haven't really pushed it beyond that. And we see on social media what AI video is doing at the moment. It doesn't quite understand yet. Obviously, as it trains and trains, but it doesn't quite understand yet actually how transitions occur or how people move, or it seems to just fade realities with realities rather than cutting. You know what I mean? It doesn't cut to a new angle. You have to get a human in there to kind of tell it cut here, you know? Um yeah. And oh yeah, Runway, it should be noted, is disliked by many members of the creative community and is currently being sued by a group of visual artists for copyright infringement.
Yeah,
It's
they're
great
involved
news,
in
isn't
that
it?
big lawsuit that was started by a number of concept artists and illustrators. Now, here's
Yes.
something interesting. This story went quite, got quite a big reaction across all social media, and
Hmm.
when we published it, and a lot of people are saying, we should boycott Lionsgate films, and that
Yeah.
I don't think people really understand like how boycotts work, because that there needs to be a consensus among the general
Yeah.
population, and the general
Mm.
population is not really aware of what this tool is. You can boycott it if you want, but they're like, oh, we're not
Yeah.
going to watch Lionsgate films. Here's the other thing too, is I know for a fact that there are other major studios that have signed deals with Runway and other AI
Mm.
companies to develop custom models, proprietary custom models of their own content, right? They haven't been announced yet, but I do know for a fact that these deals have already happened, right? So and it has happened on the animation side, right?
Mm.
So I can't say anything more about it without revealing. But this is
Wow.
not like if you can't just boycott Lionsgate, you're gonna have to boycott all of Hollywood, right? Because this is the
Yeah.
direction things are going in, and it's not a good direction. But I'm just saying, this is the first public instance of it being spoken out, but it's not the first time that it's happening, right? Over the last year,
Mm.
other studios have done this as well. So
Mm.
we're heading into a very interesting moment of where this is going to end up, but
Mm.
this is only the beginning. And
Yeah,
and
it is the first shift. Yeah.
you're going to have to boycott all of Hollywood, you know, and that's not going to happen, obviously. So
Yeah. Do you know, you want to know, I know we talk about Ireland every single time in this podcast. Do you want to know an interesting fact about boycotting? It started here, and it's named after a man called Captain Charles Boycott, who
are
was
you serious?
ostracized. Yeah, it's an Irish thing. He was a land agent who was trying to evict people, and one of our um, leaders of the Land League basically said, just shun him in society like non-violently. So it's literally named after this man, Charles Boycott.
Wait, so they were boycotting him, or he started the idea of boycotts, or they were boycotting this guy named Boycott?
They they started doing a thing that became known as boycotting because it was named after him. He so his family legacy is giving birth to this name,
Wow.
even though he all he did was try to evict people, and they shunned him from the local society, and now they've named that whole thing after him.
And that's why we don't
So
hear the name. I've never even heard of the last name Boycott. I guess people don't want to.
they just got rid of
are
him. Yeah.
are there people in Ireland still named Boycott? Have
That's a
you
great
met?
question.
Have you met
Well, they were
anybody?
British land agents, so they might
Oh,
be
okay.
in Britain still, you know.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, that was out in Mayo anyway, so I'll have a look around Mayo. But
that's a
anyway,
good. That's
sorry,
a good story.
that's the Irish fact there for the show. Yeah.
Um, always learn something new about Ireland with on this live stream. That's the
Yeah,
added benefit. We talk about animation, but Ireland is always kind of
Ireland is
part of the backdrop.
Ireland
I
is a,
love that.
as long as I'm here, so is Ireland. I'm sorry to say,
We
but
got a comment
yeah.
here. You
Oh,
want to take over
great.
the comment from Kid Pen?
Oh, I was reading Jerry Bryce's one. Wow, I
Okay.
hope that's
Wow.
about boycotting. The part about scant details on what will be used to train the models seems telling that they don't care about the ethics of it. I totally agree. And if you look at this company, Runway, who's involved in this um, lawsuit of copyright infringement, I think already the ethical level of a company like that is pretty low, as well as a company coming out and saying, we want to fire loads of people's jobs or we want to lose loads of people's jobs in the future. They're not exactly standing on the highest moral ground here. So I don't think the pursuit of what they're doing is going to be the best. Now, that could change if it's their own library that they own. You know, what's the legality of that then? Is it totally in their ownership? Is there stuff that is owned by some of the directors or producers who've left? But I assume studios just own their stuff, right? It just
Well,
falls into them.
so here's the thing. I mean, even if they own their stuff, though, they have all kinds of contracts over likenesses and
Mm.
voices and
Yes, yeah,
performances and logos and trademarks. All of this stuff has to be taken into consideration.
yeah,
And you have to
yeah.
assume that Lionsgate, they feel confident enough. They've reviewed.
Mm.
I mean, obviously they've had tons of lawyers review this. They obviously feel confident enough doing this, but there are going to be legal issues around this. And this is
Yeah.
really, it's not even Runway. This is a proprietary model that Lionsgate is building. So they're the ones that have to do
Mm.
the clearances on this. And you can
Yeah.
probably assume that they feel, comfortable enough that they can defend what they're doing. But
Yeah.
there's all kinds of contracts over performances and likenesses that they've signed. So I don't know. It opens up a big can of worms for them,
Yeah.
and where it goes from here, well, it's going to play out over years and years from now. Like, we don't know where it's going to go, but
Yeah.
they're doing things here that were likely never the intent of the contracts that were initially signed by performers. So
Mm.
this becomes,
Definitely.
and this is why there
Definitely.
was so
Yeah.
much. This is why AI was such a big discussion and contentious point for the SAG-AFTRA negotiations
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
year, right? The actors were worried about this, and I don't think they ever came up with a good solution to it. But
Mm.
now the studios are just pushing forward and they're doing whatever they want with all this material that they own,
Yeah.
and
Which
it's
is
going to be a
scary as
legal
well,
issue.
is that?
It is. It's going to be a very interesting few years coming up. I think we're
Yeah.
literally at the start of this story,
Yeah.
and the story is kind of revealing itself little by little, where studios are getting bolder and bolder to say, we're going to just, start replacing
We're,
you,
yeah.
right? And here's the
We're
thing
just
with
doing whatever we want. Yeah.
animation, it's live action is harder to do, but if you look at animation, like,
Mm.
it's much simpler if you look at like preschool shows, right? The motion in those shows, that's something that
Yeah.
an AI, you feed like, you know, a few hundred episodes of preschool animation into there, it can
Mm.
reasonably replicate that motion because it's simple motion. It's not a
Yeah.
human locomotion. It's just walk cycles and
Mm.
mouth charts and dialogue, and you know, this has a very big implication for the future of animation. And I can tell you
Yes.
again
Yeah.
for a fact that I know there are some major Hollywood companies that are building their own models with the help of these AI companies using their own animation content. So
Mm, mm,
I think they're more kind of in a experimental phase right now, but they're doing it,
yeah.
and I don't know what that means for
Mm.
for the future of animation or
But
Hollywood.
it's just interesting as well, like when you hear a statement like we're looking at pre-production and post-production, it's as if the executives think that humans are only involved in the production phase of it, which is the shooting, right? And which is just not true. You know, it's just not true. If you're starting to get rid of humans at the pre-production phase, well, you're never going to have something like Star Wars. I mean, George Lucas struggled to pitch that until he got a guy to paint pictures for him, which is again human creativity coming across the board, you know. um and those pictures set the tone of exactly what Star Wars would become. Like, they're legendary, beautiful pictures of, like, that is actually it right there, that is it. um, as opposed to getting an AI to generate spaceships painted by whatever Michelangelo. You know, it just would be okay. That does look beautiful, but it's not. It doesn't evoke like some kind of imaginative thing for me. It's just replicating what I asked it to replicate rather than being lost in a world. And there's humans involved in pre-production all the time. Like, I'm in pre-production, you know, fair enough. You could get someone to come along and cut me out. That's not a problem. But then also post-production, they're like, we can just get an AI to generate explosions. You know, we can get them to generate this. And AI, I think, would be a really helpful tool for post-production if they don't cut the budgets. You know, then AI would level the field so it's actually fair payment and time, I think, for those artists that are working on it. But if, you know, having these strong tools, but as we know, they're investing in it heavily so they can cut all those budgets, which is crazy because you're not thinking about the kind of human impact that this has then.
I think one of the things that we need to distinguish too is what you're talking about is filmmakers creating art, right? And
Yeah.
these companies are focused on generating content, right? They're global
Mm,
companies. Their audience, American film companies, they used to be kind of focused on American audiences and they would send their films abroad, but it was creating content for the American market. Today, these companies
mm,
like Lionsgate and Netflix, they have to create content for global audiences, right? There's billions and
mm.
billions of people and they have to generate content constantly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we don't. There's something like 600 series or something that debuted in the last 2 years. It's
Wow.
it's 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 more than any single person can ever consume, right? Like we can't ever
Yeah.
consume any of this, but a niche audience will want to consume some certain show that they make, right? And they
Mm-hmm.
just want to have enough content so they can, hit all these different niches and they don't
Mm,
care if it's like art, right? They just need stuff to fill up their services. They have to create content. And so I think really where we're going to head is there's going to be two tiers of content creation in the future. One is going to be companies pumping out stuff through
mm.
technical processes and just however they can cheaply so they can fill up content. And this is, you already see it on YouTube where like there's these children's channels that just pump out, junk, right? But it keeps
Yeah.
it keeps the audience coming back. And then you're going to have the tier of where we still are, which is, a lot of filmmakers who actually want to say something with their art, right?
Mm.
I think there's going to be space for that, and there
Of
actually
course. Yeah.
might be more value to that as well because people are going to go, I'm tired of watching like this 80 episodes of this
Mm.
AI generated uh, you know content. I
Go
actually
on.
want
Yeah.
I actually want but a lot of people are not into the arts in the same
Mm.
way, right? A lot of people just want to have something on while they're working. They want to have some, show playing on their, computer, right?
Mm.
They need hours and hours of content. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see a real tiered system of content creation in the future. I don't know.
That's an
That's my
interesting
take.
take. No, it is an interesting take. I do believe that. I think as well, it's like trying to wrap your head around global production uh, as a like you're literally producing content for nearly every region in the world, right? To some degree, you're making content for India, you're making some for Southeast Asia, you're making some for Europe, you're making some for England, you're making some for America, you're making some for Brazil. You know, does that then mean a better way to go about that is don't centralize the studio as a kind of a single location, and start branching them out to be um, separate entities or arms of that, kind of like how corporations do it, right? Um, Google, they have a building in Ireland that focuses on your, that kind of thing, um, as opposed to the studio system, which is the studio is here, and this is all the people that run it, and we send stuff there. Is it like the upper levels too shallow to support all that, and is that why you think they may be looking at pumping content creation because they're not expanding themselves to meet the demands of the market?
Well, they can't, right? Lionsgate is not a big enough company to
Mm.
expand to service a global market, right? So yeah, they certainly can't generate the amount of content that is required to compete with like a Netflix, and even Netflix
Yeah, I was talking about
can't.
Netflix though.
Yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, go on. But it's something like a Netflix. Could they do something like that?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that it's a real question.
I'm sure they will, and I think what we might see in the future too is like people making shows and then using AI to adapt those shows to different markets. Like
Oh yeah,
let's change this character
the language, the
into
lip sync.
no,
Yeah.
not even language or lip sync, but I mean that's where they're at right now. But you
Mm.
can actually see them just replacing the characters. Let's create an all Indian cast of this show that's already made, right? In the past,
Whoa. Yeah.
this is exactly what happens in different countries is they remake like sitcoms with their local actors, right?
Hmm.
And so the kind of the scripts are already kind of done. They just have to adapt it to the local language. But what happens if you make that process where you're not remaking a show 20, 30 different times for different markets? You're just kind of putting it into the system and it's
Yeah.
changing
Dropping a
the
new asset.
yeah,
Yeah.
changing the characters, visually to match, and I don't know. It really could go anywhere, um, and it's
Mm.
gonna take a lot of jobs, I think. But is it creatively
Yeah.
like is remaking the same sitcom 20 different times for 20 different markets really a good use
Mm.
of resources? I mean, it's
Mm.
more work for people, but if a technical process could do that, why not just have that done digitally?
They'll certainly experiment it. Yeah. And thanks for putting that out there, Mead. For these people to think about now. The a couple of comments here. Got one from Kid Pen. There's always room for Irish stories. I agree. Thank you. Also, he says preschool kids deserve thoughtfully made shows too, even if they're simple. I totally agree. Of course, I agree. The problem with kids today is they'll just consume, irregardless. They just consume and they don't stop. I've seen, my niece or nephew. They're looking at one thing and they're looking at another thing while scrolling on something else. Like they're over. Their attention is just oversaturated. It's just constant feeding things in, and I don't know how to do it. Like, you see it on things like TikTok or Instagram now, where you can't just play a video; they have like gameplay happening underneath to try and hold people's attention. So they listen to one and watch the other. It's just bizarre how like
I was so
the
confused
market is.
when I
Oh, are
first
you?
saw that. I was like, why are they
Yeah.
doing this? I didn't realize that. it took me a while to realize, oh, it's because it's targeted to this new generation that can't watch just
Have
one
no
piece of
attention
content,
spans.
right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really
it's
it's really
crazy.
scary and sad.
It just means that, and I've seen memes of it where someone's talking out loud and the person isn't paying attention to them, so they put on an iPad beneath them and start playing video game, and then they keep talking, as if then the person starts paying attention to them. Then
I
but
think
it's
Kamala Harris put out of part of their campaign is they're actually putting the gameplay videos on her speaking, like they're officially releasing content
wow,
for the campaign
wow.
with like gameplay below it, and like
Is
it's
that
real.
in satire or is it just to hold the attention
No,
of?
it, it
of
I think it was kind of like an acknowledgement of like, hey, we're like hip, right? Like, look at what we're doing with our campaign.
yeah,
We know what you want, right? But it's
yeah,
it's
which
it's
is not,
also
yeah.
very cynical and kind of
Mm.
you know devaluing your whole platform when you do that.
Yeah,
We have another comment though. Disney Animation Studios will make a comeback with upcoming films Moana 2 and Zootopia 2. Well, that's what they're hoping. Yeah,
double it up, baby.
yeah.
Two sandwich, and then
We're
we've
gonna,
got a three coming right after it.
yeah,
Frozen 3. I think they'll make good money on those films. To be fair, I think they will definitely with Moana. Anyways, Zootopia, I'd be really curious. That seems to be like a sleeper favorite. A lot of people love Zootopia, but not a lot of people talk about it. If that makes sense. And then Jerry Bryce, Sanford and Son was originally. Let me just open this up here. A program in the UK called Steptoe and Son. Wow, so they're already on this.
well, I mean, there's so many examples of that.
Oh, okay.
Three's Company was a British show. Was it called Man of the House, something like that? I mean,
Oh
a lot of
yes,
shows,
sorry,
or
remakes. Yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah,
or The
yeah.
Office, right? They
Yeah,
remade that
big
whole
example.
thing
Yeah,
for U.S. audiences. I
and it
mean,
worked. Yeah, and
yeah,
you see
so
it as well. Like I don't know. Sometimes I've watched a Bollywood film. And I'm like, I feel like I've watched this before, and it turns out to be a remake of Forrest Gump or something.
yeah,
It's just like, and that's a real thing, by the way. But you're just like, oh, okay. It just means that the stories have an impact, and they know it's a bankable story to kind of bring across and do something with. But sometimes it doesn't work as well. Like famously, UK sitcoms never transferred well to the US. It was a very hard thing for them to break. I think The Office was one of the most successful
well,
things because,
Three's Company.
okay, apart from that, yeah. In my
That
memory, Amid,
that's my reference to the 1970s right there. But Three's Company ran for 8 years, I
yeah.
think, something like that. And it was the British sitcom only ran for like one season. I think one or two
Same as
seasons.
The Office. There's only
Yeah,
2 seasons of The Office. The UK Office. Um, Whereas the American one had something like 8 seasons as well, didn't it? The
yeah,
US Office.
yeah.
But
So
that seems like a weirder thing to do for animation, where it's easier to localize it, right? It's far easier to localize because the lip sync is loose enough that you can change that up a bit. So do you want to hear another interesting fact I learned recently? Not relevant to this podcast at all, but just a kind of UK US thing. Do you know Dennis the Menace? You've Dennis the Menace, right?
yeah.
There's a UK version and a American version.
Mm-hmm.
But do you know that they both premiered on the same day in the same year, separately in each country, and neither of them had anything to do with the other one?
I'm sad to say that I actually knew that.
You did know that,
I did know
yeah.
that. It's always
But
been
anyone in
super.
the chat, if
Yeah,
anyone in the chat
but
didn't know that,
that is a crazy fact right there. Yeah, that there are
yeah,
two totally separate characters, and they premiered literally on
totally
the
different.
same day in like 1951. I want to say. I don't know.
Yeah,
I have to
it was
look that up.
crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
But yeah, I think the U.S. one is better.
Okay, whatever.
But
Yeah.
I think all people on that side of the Atlantic are like,
Yeah.
no, our Dennis the Menace is better. So I don't know.
Well,
I
it's
think it's
funny,
just what you grew
it's
up
not
with.
often you're wrong in your opinion, Amit, but I can't agree with you there.
Yeah, no, and they're very specific. Like I've
Mm.
never really delved too much into the other one, but the U.S. Dennis the Menace is, very iconic nuclear family, 1950s
Yeah.
U.S. I mean, it's very rooted in American suburban culture. So
Mm.
created by a Disney animator, Hank Ketchum.
Yeah.
I don't know who
Yes.
created
Yeah.
the UK Dennis the Menace.
I couldn't tell you either, but
Yeah.
it was in the Beano. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's pretty much it for this week. I mean,
Hmm.
we could talk about other stuff, but this is kind of it's fun to kind of look at all these different things that are happening and try to kind of make sense of them as one, because
Mm.
all of these
Mm.
things are connected, and this is one of the things that we've always tried to do through Cartoon Brew is to give context to stories and just make sure it's not like, we publish individual stories every day, but everything's connected. And
Hmm.
if you look at the
Hmm.
current state of the industry, there's a lot of things that are happening that are all kind of tied together, but it's not always clear, and it's up to readers and it's up to the people who work in the business. You got to make sense of it. You have to kind of connect all the dots and see what the bigger picture is. That's what we're kind of trying to do on this live stream, and I think it was really useful this week to talk about these stories,
Mm.
especially with the ongoing negotiations. And this, there's a lot of stuff for people to think about,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
and I think it was a good discussion. So
Yeah.
thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll be back not next week, because next week is the Ottawa Animation Festival, which will probably cover the following time we have a live stream, but it is the
Hmm.
largest animation festival in North America. So looking forward to that. I'm going for the first
Yeah.
time
Enjoy it.
since COVID. So um,
Wow.
it's going to be interesting.
Get the word on the ground.
Yeah.
The common folk back back down to the level of the commoners. You might be boycotted. Yeah, I think it was great. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you for all the comments and intrigue in the discussion as well. It always helps us to be able to engage with people. I think live really does help kind of spice it up a bit, because it can often take us in directions we're not quite expecting.
That's it. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you in a
Yeah.
bit, Cole. Thank you.